So let me come back around to that question of what's the point or what's the benefit in realizing emptiness. So the direct answer is it's going to benefit your mental state. And the reason why is because it's because of our grasping, our attachment and grasping to objects that we experience all kinds of difficulties. So I've given some of you this example that, let's say I had a cup, and there was a cup that I didn't really care much about, a cup that maybe I had somewhat of an attachment to, and one that I was really attached to. And you can just think of that example and think about what kind of influence that attachment might give to, if something were to happen to that cup. So there's also a famous quote that says, if you fixate on things as if they existed, you'll never gain liberation. If you fixate them as if they were non-existent, you won't gain any good position in the world, or you won't gain a good rebirth in the future life, something like that. So when it says that if you grasp at them as being existent, that you won't gain liberation, liberation means liberation from this cycle of fixation and grasping. And in terms of that liberation, then there are talked about in the text 3 different levels of liberation. It's a complicated discussion about the difference between Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, and Bodhisattva liberation. But anyway, that's 3 different kind of stages, you could say, or levels of liberation that could be attained. So anyway, if you believe in existence, if you're fixated on existence, then you won't attain any of those states of liberation. And on the other side, if you fixate, or if you believe that things don't exist at all, like utter non-existence, if you're nihilistic, you say that cause and effect doesn't matter, karma doesn't matter, I can do whatever I want, then that's going to bring about all kinds of very difficult repercussions for you. And you will not experience any kind of happiness and will not attain a fortunate rebirth in a future lifetime. And so basically what that is binding us or keeping us in a state which is not free or not liberated. It is our mind which is being bound, which is the thing that is not free, or which is being bound. And so by practicing this, or trying to see or realize emptiness, we are trying to release the bondage or release those binds that are restricting our mind. You can call it emptiness or not. The point is we're trying to see what is actually there. What is reality? What is the true circumstance or the true situation of things? And for us to be able to look at that and see, is that the case or not? That's what we're doing. And so it's like I taught, a couple weeks ago we had a Vipassana teaching, and in that there's a quote that says, if you were to catch a thief, if you see them and recognize them as a thief, they will run away on their own. You don't have to chase them out. And it's the same. If you see reality, then that bondage is freed or liberated. Yeah. And so I think that, it may be becoming a little bit heavy, I'm giving you too much information, but I know a lot of you are meditators, and sometimes it's good to focus in on practices and meditation. And sometimes it's good to get, a big kind of download of information of the philosophical side of things. So now I'm going to come back around to something else. It is on the same topic. It's talking about the third turning of the wheel, talking about the enlightened intention, or the kind of what is encompassed by the teachings in that text, the Uttara Tantra that I mentioned yesterday. And so coming back around to a question that was asked yesterday, someone asked about how, pure perceptions and these pure qualities of the kayas and wisdoms and so forth are qualities of the appearing aspect of the Buddha nature, but what about our ordinary perceptions, ordinary things that we see? Are those also happening as a display of, or the appearing aspect of Buddha nature, or what is that about? And so I'll come around and answer that question from another perspective, which is a quote directly from the Uttara Tantra, where it says, impure, slightly purified from impure, and utterly pure, in stages we have ordinary beings, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. So coming back around, we have unpure, impure, completely impure, somewhat pure, or you could say in the process of purification, and utterly pure. And those are the stages that one would go through as an ordinary being, a bodhisattva, and a fully enlightened Buddha. And the perceptions of those 3 beings, or a person in those 3 stages, are very different. And so when we say impure, the first one, or unpurified, what we're talking about in the classical text, we talk about 2 kinds of obscurations. One we call afflictive obscuration, and something called cognitive obscurations. And so those are obscuring your Buddha nature. And so that first level of an ordinary sentient being is someone who hasn't purified that at all. And so then to apply that same thing to the other two stages, then in the middle, you have someone who is in the process and has done a certain amount of purification of those two types of obscurations, afflictive obscuration and cognitive obscuration. And then the third stage at which one is completely purified of or has completely refined away all of these types of obscurations. So you're probably wondering, it could be the case that you're wondering, what is an afflictive obscuration and what is a cognitive obscuration? So the afflictive obscurations are connected directly to the afflictive emotions. So we come back around to, for example, like the 5 poisons: the attachment, aversion, stupidity, jealousy, and pride. So those are the afflictive obscurations. You will not be free from samsara. So we have to make a distinction here, just a clarification. Free from samsara does not necessarily mean a fully enlightened Buddha. So I don't want to get into the details of that yet, but just understand that initially, liberation from samsara and Buddhahood are not exactly the same thing. So the first point is that if you still have afflictive obscurations, you won't be liberated from samsara. And so cognitive obscurations are, to use the technical term, they are the 3 spheres. So the 3 spheres is like the belief that in an action, for example, that there's a me who's doing something, an action that's being done, and a recipient to that action, and seeing that as believing that those exist in some, like, truly exist. To put that more simply, it means just cognitive obscuration means that you don't see true reality. So I said that there's like the level of reality of seeing the selflessness of the person as well as seeing the emptiness of all phenomena. For example, your 5 aggregates and so forth. So if you don't know that, if you haven't had that realization, then you are cognitively obscured. And what that means to be cognitively obscured means that that is the obscuration from preventing you from becoming a fully enlightened Buddha, a fully all-knowing Buddha, you could say. So it's said that the Buddha knows the nature of all things. And if you are still in that state where you haven't seen the nature of all things, then you are being obscured from becoming a fully enlightened Buddha. So the Buddha said, if there is even one thing that you have not fully understood or fully recognized or fully realized the nature of, the easier way to put it in positivistic terms is you will not attain full enlightenment. You will not attain the state of omniscience if there is a single phenomena that you have not recognized the nature of. So the perceptions of those 3 levels of beings or a person at 3 stages in their development will be completely different depending on or because of the intensity or amount of, you could say, obscuration of those 2 types of obscurations, which are obscuring their Buddha nature, either entirely, meaning they haven't purified anything, or in the middle stage, that they are in the process, they have done some level of purification, or at the stage of a Buddha where they have completely purified and refined away all of those obscurations.
That actually is very clear to me. And I've been struggling this morning with the concept of emptiness, and so to shift a little bit, it is helping me. And I'm trying to be patient with myself and realize that I will not understand everything that's taught this weekend, but that by meditating and contemplating on the teachings that progress.
So it said, in the teachings, like kind of along with what you said, even just initially hearing it, even if you don't fully understand it right now, having heard those teachings, when you reach a certain stage in your practice, when things are starting to happen that accord with what you've heard, it's very helpful, actually. So amongst all the people listening here, I'm sure there are all different levels at which people are understanding what's being taught this weekend. And even all different levels, most of you are people who are in that middle stage where you've done some level of purification of those obscurations. And so I think for most of you who are practicing and have had some experience of this, then you can probably kind of get some perspective in your mind of, oh, my ordinary perception is like this. My perception in a state of deep meditation or in my meditative experience is like this. Oh, I guess Buddhahood must be something like that. You at least have some like frame of reference for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Justin, there's a question in the chat from earlier, and it's, I have often heard the term non-duality, and is that related to this idea that emptiness is form?
So, yes, Because in that context, if you wanted to apply non-duality to form as emptiness, form and its emptiness are non-dual. They are not two things. Like, for example, the horns of a yak, the left and right horn, are two different things, and putting them together doesn't make them non-dual. But form and form's emptiness are not two different things. They're inseparable. So form, or a particular form, we're not just talking about an abstraction here, is emptiness, and its emptiness, or emptiness in that case, is that form. And so other than that emptiness, there is no form. And other than that form, there isn't any emptiness. Or separated from that form, its emptiness isn't somewhere over there, is what it's saying. And then when we see the kind of obvious appearance of an object with our eyes, and then with our mind or our wisdom mind, we see the emptiness of that experience, where your eyes are seeing the form, but your wisdom mind is seeing the emptiness. There aren't two different things that you're actually seeing. You're just perceiving the thing from two sides, or like two aspects of the same thing. And so those are an equality, aren't they? Like they're non-dual. And so in the same way, it's not just forms. So like in the Heart Sutra, where that quote comes from, it goes, the same goes for feelings, perceptions, conditioning factors, and consciousness. So like that's applying that to the five aggregates. So basically it's saying that that is the same, that feeling or feelings and their emptiness are also non-dual. Perceptions and their emptiness are also non-dual, and so forth for all of the five aggregates. So in the more extensive, so that the Heart Sutra is a very condensed form of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras that are called the Great Mother Sutras. There is a much longer one called the Perfection of Wisdom in 100,000 lines. And in that, instead of just saying the same goes for this and that, the Buddha spells it out for each and every phenomena. It's very extensive teaching. That one is not available in English, but the 25,000 line one is either out right now or going to be out soon on the 84,000 website if you want to do some deep reading. 84,000 is a project of Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche to translate all the collected works of the Buddha, and it's making huge progress right now. And so that's one of their newest, either it's out now or it's soon to come out, the Perfection of Wisdom in 25,000 lines. All right.
Geraldine, did you want to ask the question?
Yeah, let's take some questions.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Rinpoche. I love your teachings. My questions, could it be possible for someone who has deep insight in the reality, in the true reality, could it be possible to let go of all the afflictive and cognitive obscurations once and for all, suddenly, and to get the liberation from samsara and enlightenment suddenly, by letting go suddenly of all these obscurations? Or is it necessary a progressive progress, a process?
And so, yes, that's possible, but it really depends upon the individual. So there was one famous person in India named Indra Bodhi, who was one of the Buddhist disciples. And it said that he, as soon as he heard the teachings, he immediately realized them and fully attained all of the, without needing to actually gradually meditate, fully manifested the result and instantaneously. And then also in our tradition, in the Nyingma tradition, there are, a lot of great masters such as Guru Rinpoche, who also we consider to have that kind of instantaneous realization. So those are just some famous examples, and I suppose there are quite a few other just lesser known individuals out there who have attained such things. But for most of us, I think that first we need to understand some things, then we need to familiarize ourselves with them through meditation. And it doesn't happen instantaneously because the habitual patterns are so ingrained in us that they're not just overcome instantly.
And on our path of meditation, Dzogchen meditation, is it necessarily progressive, or maybe at some point after practicing, maybe we can have a sudden big realization,
Yeah. So yeah, there are a lot of circumstances like that where through the power of some particular circumstance, through, for example, the power of, like in what you're talking about, from the power of devotion, for example, sometimes through the power of a moment of like very powerful devotion, people suddenly make a leap in their progress to where they sat down on the cushion, they were an ordinary being, and at the end of the session, they were already a bodhisattva with direct realization. So that's certainly possible and happens quite a lot.
Is the devotion the most crucial point for this?
That's also dependent on the individual, because different people have a different kind of capacity or a different particular quality that they're naturally inclined towards or good at. Like some people have a very sharp like reasoning mind or intelligence. Some people are naturally inclined towards and have a naturally arising of powerful compassion. Some have a natural arising of powerful devotion, and any one of those things could empower that type of situation.
Thank you very much. It is so, all your teachings and explanation are so clear, helpful. You know, I have heard many teachings, and your teachings make me understand deeply and very easily. I am very grateful. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Karen Pochela.
Merci.
Okay, so maybe I'll move on to a different little topic here. So in one of the sutras, one of the Buddha Nature Sutras, in the third turning of the wheel teachings, one of the bodhisattvas asked the Buddha, he said, so previously you had taught that everything's empty, and now you're saying that there is this Buddha nature that exists. So what's up with that? What do you mean? So the first purpose is so that practitioners will not feel a lack of courage or a self-defeatist kind of attitude, that they'll be encouraged. So for some practitioner, if they don't understand that they have Buddha nature, then they may think, what's the point of doing all this work? I can't attain this anyway. I don't have any qualities in myself. But once they know that they already have the innate qualities of Buddhahood within them, then that can prevent them from becoming discouraged in that way. So then the second reason is so that you would not look down upon, criticize, or deprecate other beings who you might think of as ordinary. Since you might think, I'm a practitioner and I've developed some qualities. These are just normal people over here. So it would prevent you from falling into that, like a negative view of others. And so, in this world, we make so many distinctions and biases of gender biases, racial biases and distinctions and so forth. And it is this, Buddha nature and the existence of Buddha nature that kind of destroys all of that, that eliminates all of that. And then, so the other one is to prevent you from thinking that everything's terrible, something like that. Like you might get into a view that all there is negativity, all there is suffering of samsara. And so to show that that's not the entire picture. So one time, Khenchen Namdro Jamtso was teaching in Parping in Nepal, and there was a student from Singapore there, and he said, we were talking, he said, this is so strange, Up to now, we've all thought about like our body, our whole situation as something like negative, something suffering, something to be overcome. And now it seems like there's something great, something good within us, and it's really encouraging. The next one is to be able to encourage others towards the Dharma, because it's easy to encourage people if you can tell them that they already have this potency, this potential within them. And so it's the same, like you come to know it for yourself, and then you can encourage others in it, just like the Buddha did. The Buddha came to realize the nature of reality and then was able to encourage others to practice the Dharma. And you can see that in the accounts of so many disciples of the Buddha that came to him and that attained these states of becoming an arhat, becoming a bodhisattva, and so forth. And then the last of these, the fifth, is to prevent you from feeling too proud of yourself, too like you're something really special. So the Buddha said that it is to overcome, it is for these 5 purposes and to overcome certain things that I've listed here, that I've taught the existence of the Buddha nature. So then, having said this, then in Tibet, there were so many different ways of explaining the intention of what the Buddha had said here. So some of the traditions in Tibet said, the Buddha just said that to steer people in the right direction. He didn't really mean it. It's just a provisional teaching. But in our tradition, the early translation school, the Nyingma school, where we say that in terms of these 5 reasons and the way the Buddha talked about this, the 5 reasons or 5 purposes for teaching Buddha nature, that it's not like, it's not a case where the Buddha knew that Buddha nature didn't exist, but just said it did to help people for these 5 reasons. But we say that the Buddha said that Buddha nature exists because it does exist and that it serves these 5 purposes. So like if there is something within me, but I don't recognize it's within me, and I just think I'm pitiful or I'm poor because I don't have anything, but actually I do have something, then that's just me being down on myself for not recognizing something that I do have. But then if I'm not recognizing certain qualities in myself, but someone else finally points them out to me and says, you're not without qualities, you're good at this, you're good at that, you're handsome, you're smart, whatever. Then finally I can gain some self-composure, some self-confidence within that. So that's the way the Nyingma tradition explains this. But there are some other traditions which explain this. Going back to the example, I don't actually have any good qualities, and someone's just kind of like puffing me up so that I don't feel bad about myself. That's how they explain the Buddha's explanation of these 5 purposes, that the Buddha didn't actually believe that Buddha nature existed, but just said it did to give people confidence. So all of the 4 great traditions, there are 4 main traditions, you could say, in the Tibetan world, and all of them are teaching the same Dharma, but in all of these types of circumstances, just like I showed here, there are slight differences in the way they interpret and comment on different points of the Buddha's teachings. But everything that I've been saying here is all taken from the perspective of the early translation school, the Nyingma tradition. And so you may hear teachings from a different tradition, and they may have some different perspectives on some of these same points. And particularly on this point about Buddha nature, you'll hear some of the most diverse different ways of explaining some of these points. So that's one other important point or main point about Buddha nature is these 5 purposes for teaching the Buddha nature.
Hannah asked a question. Is this also the perspective in the Gelug tradition?
It's hard to say with 100% accuracy without going into the details of their position, but on the most common way of talking about what the Gelugpa believe about Buddha nature is that they say that Buddha nature is just emptiness, like just a mere emptiness. So they use a term like the precious non-implicative negation. This is a whole nother philosophical discussion to get into what that means, but... And so what a lot of people will argue back to the Gelugpas in that position is if you're saying that it's merely this kind of empty aspect, the absence aspect is what's meant by a non-implicative negation. So this is a complicated topic, but if you say non-implicative negation, it means that you're merely refuting some kind of existence without positing anything in its place. And so what all the other schools will argue against to the Gelugpas is if you're saying that Buddha nature is merely an absence, how can you talk about any positive qualities of enlightenment? So we have to be able to explain those aspects of wisdom, the Buddha's wisdom mind, or those states of timeless awareness that we talked about before, because those are a part of Buddhahood. But when you start getting into those differences between the Nyingma, Gelugpa, Kagyu, it gets really complicated, and it becomes a matter of like, if you don't already have a very clear understanding of all the Buddhist jargon and the technical terms, it's really hard to even know the distinctions.
Oh, there's a question from Adrian. What would be the Namchak stream definition of Dharma?
So just to put one context, Namchak is not any different, or their positions on any kind of philosophy are not going to be different than the Nyingma tradition. We are just a sub-lineage in the Nyingma tradition. And so Namchak is just like a practice lineage, like a sub-practice lineage within the Nyingma tradition. So if you're talking about the 4 big schools of Tibetan Buddhism, Namchak is Nyingma. And so Dharma is defined as, it has 2 qualities. We say that it has the quality of, you could say curing or transforming is another way of translating that word, and the other quality of protecting. So it will cure you of, you could say, the illness of the afflictions, and protect you from all of the kind of sufferings of samsara. So that's like the 2 qualities that are defining Dharma. So that's a big, overarching kind of topic, a big topic, yeah. But you'll find, when you want to talk about what is this tradition's or that tradition's particular explanation, you're going to find more differences when you're talking about the explanation of emptiness, the explanation of Buddha nature. But on a very general topic, it's almost identical. Like there's hardly any difference. Like those differences are very subtle, even the small philosophical differences on Buddha nature and so forth. Some of them are kind of crucial when it comes to applying it in practice, especially for people who aren't going to go deep into the philosophy. It's probably more complicated than it's worth to look into, the specific tiny differences between different traditions. Khen Rinpoche said, yeah, if you as kind of a beginner to the deeper philosophies, if you start trying to learn from too many different places, you'll just mix it all up. It'll just be a source of confusion. Okay, is there another question in the chat, Rachel? If not, we're just gonna drop here and we'll pick up at 2:00 with the next topic. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So we'll see you back in 2 hours after lunch.
Lunch.
Thank you.
Thank
Enjoy your
you.
lunch, everyone.
Everyone.